He thought he had staged the perfect humiliation. In the most expensive restaurant in the city, billionaire Gregory Vance leaned across the table, smiled at his black wife, and told her she would leave with nothing but the clothes on her back. What he didn't know, what the entire room was about to witness, was that the woman sitting quietly beside her wasn't his weapon, but hers. And when the truth came out, the man who once believed he was untouchable would tremble in front of everyone. The clinking of crystal glasses and the hush of soft jazz filled the air inside the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a place where chandeliers dripped with light like melted gold, and every table seemed to carry the weight of power. Alana Green sat across from her husband, Gregory Vance, a man whose reputation as a billionaire tycoon was as carefully polished as the cufflinks that glinted on his sleeves. To everyone else in that room, Gregory was a symbol of authority, elegance, and wealth. But to Alana, he was something far darker. The moment his lips curled into that practiced smile, she knew he was preparing to deliver the blow he had been planning for months. "Alana," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear, though his tone carried the confidence of a man who wanted witnesses. "I think it's time we accept what this marriage has become. You'll leave with nothing. Not a dime. Only the clothes on your back." The words landed like a slap, not just because of the cold finality in them, but because of the way the room seemed to shift the instant he spoke. A waiter paused, his eyes flicking between them with something more than curiosity. Across the room, a group of executives in tailored suits glanced up, their gazes sliding over Alana with that same dismissive look she had endured all her life. The silent judgment that she didn't belong in spaces like this, that her black skin was an uninvited guest in a world Gregory had always controlled. For Gregory, this wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about making her small, reminding her that no matter how much success she had achieved on her own, she was still someone he could strip down to nothing with a few cruel words. Alana's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. She had built her career long before Gregory came into her life, rising from a small studio apartment filled with fabric scraps and sketches into a nationally recognized designer, whose gowns had graced magazine covers. She had carried herself with dignity through the glares, the whispers, the doubting voices that told her a black woman could not climb so high in a world stacked against her. And yet here she was, listening to the man who had once promised her partnership and protection now positioning himself as her executioner. What Gregory didn't know, what no one in that gilded dining room suspected, was that the person sitting beside her, calm and silent, was not there to support him. Amanda Prescott was not his weapon. She was hers. But before the trap could spring, before the walls of Gregory's empire collapsed, Alana knew the story needed to be told. Because stories like this never begin at the table where the final card is played. They begin in the places where hope turns to hurt, where trust begins to erode, where love slowly unravels beneath the weight of lies. 3 years earlier, Alana had believed she was living a dream. Gregory had swept into her life with the kind of force that makes even the strongest woman pause. Flowers that arrived at her studio daily, chauffeured cars waiting outside her door, invitations to rooms she had once been excluded from. He told her she was the most remarkable woman he had ever met, that her brilliance intimidated lesser men but inspired him. For a time, she believed him. For a time, she thought perhaps love could transcend the barriers that had always shadowed her success. Yet as she sat in that restaurant now, the sting of his words echoing in her chest, she realized that Gregory had never truly loved her strength. He had loved the challenge of conquering it. And when he felt he had, when the papers with her signature on them gave him leverage, he began to twist the knife slowly. It started with subtle remarks, dressed as jokes. "You should let me handle the finances, Alana. Numbers aren't really your thing." Or, "That gala went well, though I did notice people seemed surprised when you introduced yourself as my wife." He knew the weight those words carried, the history behind them, the reminder that no matter how many gowns she sold, no matter how many glass ceilings she shattered, someone like her was still viewed as an outsider. And each time he said it, each time he let those comments cut into her, she felt the room shift against her the way it had tonight, allies turning into silent judges. But Gregory had underestimated her. He thought he could corner her, thought that by orchestrating this public humiliation, he would strip her of her dignity and erase the life she had built before him. What he failed to see was the fire behind her silence, the strength in her stillness. Because as the waiter turned away nervously, as the white-haired couple at the next table leaned in to catch every word, Alana did not shrink. She sat taller, her eyes steady, her voice calm, as though she had been expecting this moment all along. And in truth she had. Amanda Prescott, seated just a breath away, kept her gaze lowered to her glass of wine, but Alana could see the faint tremor in her hand. Gregory believed Amanda was his secret, the sharp blade he would use to sever Alana from everything she had worked for. He thought the irony was delicious, to pit his black wife against a white attorney who had the reputation of destroying marriages like theirs with surgical precision. But Gregory's arrogance blinded him, because in his mind, Alana would always be powerless, always a step behind, always the woman he could control with money, with contracts, with the color of her skin. Tonight he was about to learn how wrong he was. The restaurant air grew heavy, silence pressing in like a curtain as Alana let his words linger. She wanted him to feel the echo of them, to believe for just a moment that he had won. She wanted the room. Those who had always doubted her, those who saw her only as an ornament to his wealth, to believe it too, because the greater the fall, the sweeter the reckoning. And when the truth came crashing down, when Gregory realized the woman beside Alana was not the executioner he imagined but the witness to his undoing, the tremor that already lived in his hands would spread through every inch of his empire. For now, she simply let the silence stretch, her heart steady, her resolve unshakable. She was not leaving this dinner broken. She was not leaving with nothing. What Gregory did not know, what none of them knew, was that this night, this carefully staged humiliation, was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of his. 3 years earlier, the world had looked very different for Alana Green. Long before the glittering restaurant, before Gregory's cruel words sliced across white tablecloths, there had been a moment when she believed in the illusion of love. She remembered the night clearly, an industry gala where the air sparkled with wealth and ambition. She had been wearing one of her own designs, a dress stitched not just with thread but with years of sacrifice and determination. Gregory Vance had found her in the crowd, his charm radiating like heat from a fire, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe she had found someone who saw her brilliance. He held her hand like she was delicate, yet spoke to her like she was his equal, and in that moment, she ignored the subtle glances of disapproval that followed them around the ballroom. Those glances had always been there, the ones that asked why a black woman stood at the center of such opulence. She thought Gregory's attention meant she could rise above it, that she would finally be safe from the sting of judgment. The whirlwind romance had been something out of a storybook. Flowers arrived at her studio every morning, extravagant dinners filled her nights, and Gregory made sure the world knew she was his. For a time she believed him. When he proposed after only months of knowing her, she mistook his urgency for devotion instead of strategy. He placed a ring on her finger the size of a small star, and though his lawyers slid a prenup across the table, he assured her it was only a formality, nothing personal, just business. She remembered his words exactly. "Alana, this is to protect what I've built, but what we're building together is forever." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe love could shield her from the suspicion she always met in boardrooms and boutiques. She signed, because she thought her worth could never be measured in ink. For a while the marriage felt golden. Gregory supported her business publicly, praised her interviews, boasted about her as his wife. Alana's gowns began to appear on larger stages, the faces of famous women gracing magazine covers wearing the pieces she had once only dreamed of seeing in print. She felt as though she had stepped into a new world where race did not define her, where the walls built against her had finally crumbled. But slowly, almost invisibly, the walls rebuilt themselves, this time inside her own home. Gregory's support became scrutiny. He questioned her every decision, told her she was being reckless with ambition, suggested she should spend less time at her studio and more time, looking the part of his wife. When she succeeded, he would remind her who paid for the dinner celebrating it, who made the calls that got her dresses into certain rooms. He never raised his voice, but his words landed with precision, each one designed to remind her that without him, she was still the girl who once lived in a cramped apartment, stitching gowns under flickering lights. The comments turned sharper when they were alone. "Do you think people would take you seriously if you weren't Mrs. Vance?" he'd ask, his smile thin and sharp. Or worse, whispered truths dressed as jokes. "You're lucky they see past where you come from. Not everyone does." These weren't arguments, they were erasures. Slowly, Gregory painted over her story, trying to convince her she was nothing more than an accessory to his empire. She began to dread dinners with his colleagues, where she could feel the eyes on her skin, hear the whispered assumptions about how she had gotten here. Once, a woman leaned across the table, her pearls glinting, and asked Alana if she missed the life before all this. The life before? As if Alana had crawled into the room from some place unworthy of its polished floors. Gregory only laughed, and later in the car he said, "Don't be so sensitive, they didn't mean anything by it." But Alana knew better. The humiliation didn't come from strangers alone. It came from Gregory's silence, from his pleasure in letting her sit beneath their gaze. Still, she tried to hold on. She remembered the little girl who had grown up with nothing, who believed in building her own name. She told herself love required patience, that marriages were tested, that perhaps she was imagining the cruelty hiding behind Gregory's smile. She kept showing up at her studio, kept sketching, kept pushing forward, even as his absences grew longer. He told her he was consumed by business deals, but the perfume that lingered on his suits and the hotel bills hidden in credit card statements spoke of something else. The first real crack came when she found the receipt for a necklace, expensive enough to buy a car. When she asked about it, Gregory's lie was quick, practiced, a gift for a client. But Alana's chest tightened with the certainty of betrayal. She told herself she needed proof, but in her heart she already knew. That was when something inside her shifted. She had spent too many years fighting to be seen, to be heard, to let herself be erased now. The stares in the restaurant, the whispers at parties, the patronizing laughter of his friends, they had all taught her one thing. If she wanted to survive in Gregory's world, she could not simply endure. She would have to fight. What he didn't understand was that she had been fighting her entire life. The difference was, this time she wasn't just defending her dream. She was defending her dignity. The memory of that necklace never left her. It became a symbol, not of love, but of deception. It pushed her into the shadows of her own marriage, where she began watching, listening, piecing together the puzzle of Gregory's lies. She knew the moment of truth was coming, the one that would decide if she would leave shattered or stand unbroken. And as she sat across from him in the restaurant years later, hearing his voice drip with arrogance, she remembered those early days. The gala, the ring, the vows that now felt like chains. It all led to this table, to the moment he believed he could strip her of everything. What he didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was that she was no longer the woman he had once chosen to patronize and control. She was someone stronger, someone prepared. And soon, Gregory would realize that the same fire he thought he had extinguished was burning brighter than ever, ready to consume every lie he had built. The necklace was only the beginning. From that moment forward, Alana could no longer look at Gregory without wondering what secrets hid behind his polished smile. The man who once dazzled her with promises of devotion now carried an air of calculation, as though every word, every gesture, every kiss on the cheek was rehearsed to keep her docile. Nights grew longer with him slipping away under the guise of late meetings. Phone calls came at odd hours, his tone clipped, his answers vague. Alana's intuition, honed from years of navigating rooms where she was underestimated, told her the truth. He was living a double life. But betrayal alone did not shatter her. It was the way he seemed to revel in her unease, as if her suspicion proved she was beneath him. The man she had once trusted with her heart had transformed into a stranger, who thrived on her doubt. She tried at first to confront him gently. "Gregory, are you hiding something from me?" she had asked one night, her voice steady though her heart raced. His response was cruel in its ease. He laughed, the sound low and dismissive, before leaning close and whispering, "You should be careful, Alana. Paranoia doesn't suit you. It makes you look desperate." The way his eyes slid over her face, dismissing her pain, ignited a rage she swallowed down but never forgot. Because behind that laugh was more than mockery. It was the reminder that in his world, her accusations would never hold weight. To those around him, she was only the wife he rescued, the accessory on his arm. Her words could be twisted into hysteria, her fears dismissed as insecurity. That knowledge stung more than the betrayal itself. The truth revealed itself one afternoon when Alana, heart-pounding, decided to follow him. She waited outside his office, watching as his car pulled away, not toward any boardroom but toward the heart of the city where discreet hotels lined the streets. She parked at a distance, her hands trembling as she stepped into the lobby of an upscale restaurant across from where he entered. Her chest tightened when she saw him seated at a corner table, leaning in too close to a woman with striking confidence. Alana's stomach dropped as she studied her sharp suit, dark hair styled with precision, eyes scanning the room like someone who always controlled the narrative. The intimacy between them was undeniable, the way Gregory touched her wrist, the way she laughed with the ease of ownership. Alana thought betrayal had already hollowed her, but the discovery of who this woman was carved out something deeper. Amanda Prescott. Not simply a lover but one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the city, infamous for dismantling wealthy marriages and leaving spouses with nothing. Alana's pulse raced as the implications sank in. Gregory wasn't just unfaithful. He was orchestrating her destruction. He had armed himself with the very person whose career thrived on turning vows into weapons. And worse, he believed that because Alana was a black woman, the court of public opinion would side with him. The billionaire with charm, not her, the wife he painted as ungrateful and unstable. The realization left her breathless. Betrayal was cruel, but this was calculated annihilation. She walked back to her car with tears burning in her eyes, rage simmering beneath the surface. Every step carried the weight of humiliation. Not just from Gregory, but from a society that had always measured her worth against impossible standards. She could hear the whispers already. Maybe she married him for his money, maybe she wasn't good enough, maybe she should have known her place. Those whispers had shadowed her all her life, and now Gregory would use them to crush her completely. That was the moment Alana swore she would not be his victim. The days that followed were filled with torment and clarity. She replayed every slight, every dismissal, every time Gregory weaponized her race and her gender with a sly smile. Yet with each memory, the ache inside her sharpened into resolve. She could no longer save the marriage, but she could save herself. She began quietly, confiding only in Patricia Monroe, a private investigator with a reputation for uncovering what others buried deep. Patricia's methods were meticulous: bank statements, surveillance photos, whispered leads that turned into evidence. The more they uncovered, the more Alana saw the true scale of Gregory's deception. Offshore accounts hidden in places with names that rolled off his tongue too casually. Properties tucked under shell companies that reeked of corruption. Even collections of art and jewelry tucked into secret storage units. Assets hidden so carefully that Alana almost marveled at his audacity. But it wasn't only Gregory's deceit that Patricia unearthed. Amanda Prescott, the woman Gregory paraded as his confidant, had her own web of secrets. Through careful tracing of transactions, Patricia discovered funds missing from Amanda's firm, money siphoned from client accounts into private luxuries. The woman Gregory believed was his greatest ally was also betraying her own, siphoning millions to keep up appearances. Alana listened to Patricia's findings with a strange mixture of fury and satisfaction. The betrayal cut deeper because it was wrapped in arrogance. Gregory truly believed she had no fight in her, that her silence meant surrender. Amanda believed her sharp suits and legal reputation made her untouchable. Neither saw the fire building behind Alana's stillness. Every night she returned home, forcing herself to play the role of the obedient wife. She reminded herself of the little girl who once stitched gowns by lamplight. That child had grown into a woman who survived countless dismissals, countless doors slammed shut, countless nights where her only weapon was persistence. Now that persistence would save her again. The betrayal had wounded her, but it had also given her something she hadn't felt in months: clarity. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about justice. And so, as Gregory prepared the stage for her downfall, Alana quietly prepared her own. Every receipt, every photo, every whispered confession became ammunition. She knew the dinner was coming, the night when he would attempt to shatter her in public. But now, when that night arrived, she would not tremble, because she had something he could never comprehend. The strength born not of privilege, but of survival. and survival had always been her sharpest weapon. Alana had learned long ago that survival meant preparation, and now that knowledge became her shield. The more Patricia uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Gregory was not simply a man betraying his wife. He was a predator who fed on power, wealth, and the belief that he would never be held accountable. Alana saw it in the way he carried himself when he returned home late at night, his smile smug as if every secret he held made him stronger. She saw it in the way he dismissed her questions, rolling his eyes and telling her she was imagining things. To the outside world, he was a billionaire philanthropist, a man who shook hands with senators and donated to hospitals, a man who appeared untouchable. To Alana, he was the man who had spent months constructing a plan to strip her not only of her fortune but of her dignity, relying on her silence as a black woman to keep her cornered. The truth became even darker as Patricia's investigation reached further back. Gregory's betrayal was not an isolated event, but part of a pattern stretching years. He had done this before, luring women with charm, blending his life into theirs, then gutting them financially when he grew tired. Some were entrepreneurs who had trusted him with their businesses, only to watch them collapse after his deals strangled their resources. Others were professionals who had built reputations only to see their work stolen, their ideas patented under his name. But one detail stood out above the rest. All of these women had come from backgrounds where their voices were easily dismissed, where whispers of unworthiness carried weight. Gregory had always chosen women who had fought to be respected, women who knew what it meant to be underestimated. He didn't just crave money. He craved the power of destroying those he envied in silence. For Alana, that knowledge was both devastating and galvanizing. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was carrying the weight of every woman before her, who had been left voiceless by Gregory's cruelty. That realization deepened her resolve. Nights that could have been spent in despair became nights of planning. Patricia sat across from her at the kitchen table, folders spread between them, photographs and bank records stacked high. Each document felt like a weapon carved from truth. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, townhouses in London tucked under shell companies, art collections locked away in secret units. Patricia's voice was calm but firm as she laid out the evidence, and Alana felt a strange comfort in the precision of it all. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice, carefully prepared and sharpened. Yet beneath the steel of her resolve, Alana felt the ache of betrayal claw at her heart. There were nights she sat alone in her studio, staring at unfinished sketches, wondering how she had let herself believe in Gregory. She remembered the way his hand once rested at the small of her back, the way he introduced her as his wife with pride. To realize now that every gesture had been part of a larger performance threatened to break her. But she refused to give him that victory. Tears came, but with each one, she reminded herself of why she was fighting. She wasn't just fighting for money or status. She was fighting for the right to stand tall in a world that wanted her small. Amanda Prescott, too, was unraveling before Alana's eyes. Patricia discovered inconsistencies in her accounts that led straight to embezzlement from her own clients. The thought of Gregory aligning himself with such a woman was almost poetic. He believed Amanda was his sword, the ruthless attorney who would slice Alana apart in court. But Amanda was bleeding corruption herself, siphoning millions to maintain a faade of perfection. To Alana, it was a bitter irony. The very woman Gregory trusted to destroy her was already standing on crumbling ground. And the moment that truth was exposed, Amanda's power would collapse as quickly as it had been built. Alana began recording Gregory's words, storing them carefully like jewels, each one proof of his cruelty. She would sit silently while he lectured her about being ungrateful, her phone hidden beside her capturing every syllable. Each time he belittled her, each time he spoke of ending the marriage and leaving her with nothing, she pressed record. The files became her secret arsenal, her answer to every lie he would later tell. When Patricia suggested reaching out to authorities, Alana hesitated at first, fearing the exposure, the scrutiny that would follow. But then she thought of all the women before her, erased because they didn't have the evidence to fight back. And she thought of the smirk Gregory wore at dinner parties when he spoke of loyalty and legacy. The hypocrisy was too much to bear. So she made the call. The FBI had been circling Gregory's company for years, rumors of price fixing and fraud swirling in the shadows. When Alana offered her cooperation, she became more than a wife scorned, she became their strongest witness. She wore wires, recorded conversations where Gregory boasted about manipulating markets, hiding assets, bribing officials. It terrified her, sitting across from him at breakfast while his words were being transmitted to agents listening in real time. But it also fueled her, because every word he spoke with arrogance became another link in the chain that would one day bind him. The more Alana prepared, the more she realized Gregory's arrogance was his downfall. He believed in his invincibility so deeply that he never once suspected she was watching, listening, building her case. He saw her silence as weakness, not strategy. He mistook her stillness for submission, not strength. And Amanda, seated at his side like a queen in waiting, was blind to the cracks forming beneath her own throne. Together they planned Alana's destruction, and together they would watch their empire burn. As the date of the dinner approached, Alana's nerves coiled tight, but her purpose never wavered. She had endured too much to falter now. The restaurant was supposed to be her graveyard, the place where Gregory would bury her dignity in front of the world. Instead, it would be the stage where she resurrected her power. She knew exactly how the night would unfold. Gregory would lean across the table, his voice laced with cruelty, and believe he had won. Amanda would smirk, confident that the fight was already decided. But what they didn't know was that Alana had turned their own weapons against them. And when the moment came, she would not just defend herself. She would destroy them both. The evening of the dinner arrived draped in the kind of tension that makes the air feel heavy, as though the city itself understood that something was about to break. Alana Green had rehearsed the moment 100 times in her mind, every glance, every pause, every word carefully prepared. The restaurant was a fortress of wealth, its chandeliers scattering light across marble floors polished so bright they mirrored the faces of those who believed they belonged there. Gregory Vance walked in beside her, his hand resting possessively on the curve of her back, smiling as though he were the king of the room, and she the ornament he had chosen to decorate his reign. To those who watched, it looked like any other evening of power couples dining under crystal and gold. Only Alana knew that beneath the polished surface, storms were waiting to erupt. Gregory's arrogance carried him effortlessly to the table, his presence drawing attention the way a predator commands silence in the wild. He ordered the most expensive wine without glancing at the menu, his voice smooth, his posture relaxed. Every detail of his performance was designed to set the stage for humiliation. Alana felt the weight of eyes pressing on her skin, eyes that always seemed to question her place at his side, eyes that whispered that she did not belong in this temple of privilege. But instead of shrinking, she inhaled deeply, allowing the sting of those gazes to harden her resolve. She had not come to endure his cruelty. She had come to end it. Gregory leaned across the table, his smile sharpened into cruelty. "Alana," he said, his voice pitched low but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I think it's time we stop pretending. You'll leave with nothing. The prenup makes that clear." He delivered the words as though they were scripture, his expression that of a man confident the universe would bend to his will. The restaurant seemed to still, forks pausing mid-air, conversations halting. To the diners around them, it was spectacle. To Alana, it was the final insult, the attempt to strip her of dignity in front of a world already eager to believe she was undeserving. Her chest burned with the weight of years of prejudice, of every time Gregory had twisted her race into a weapon against her, subtle barbs disguised as jokes, public silences that cut deeper than words. He wanted this moment to confirm their suspicions, to prove that she was nothing without him. Instead, Alana let the silence stretch, her eyes steady, her voice calm when she finally spoke. "Gregory, there are things you should know before you celebrate." Her words were soft, but they carried through the room like a crack of thunder. Amanda Prescott, seated only a table away, froze mid-sip. Gregory had orchestrated her presence, believing her to be his silent witness, the lawyer who would soon dismantle Alana's world. But as Alana's gaze slid toward Amanda, something shifted. "Perhaps your friend should join us," she said evenly, her hand gesturing with elegance. The crowd stirred with interest, heads turning as Amanda hesitated, her mask of composure slipping. Slowly, unwillingly, she stood and crossed the room. Gregory's smile faltered for the first time, a shadow flickering in his eyes. Do you know what I find fascinating, Gregory? Alana continued, her voice rising just enough to draw in every ear around them. You thought betrayal was invisible. You thought lies could be hidden behind expensive suits and signed contracts. But I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the art hidden in Queens. I know about every dollar you tried to bury. Gregory's jaw tightened, his hand trembling slightly against his glass. He tried to interject, but Alana pressed forward, her words sharpened by years of silence now breaking free. And Amanda, darling, she turned, locking eyes with the lawyer. I know about the embezzlement, the stolen funds, the missing millions. The very firm you swore loyalty to will bury you once the truth is revealed. The restaurant erupted into whispers, gasps spreading like wildfire. Amanda's face drained of color, her body stiff as though the weight of her own sins pressed her down. Gregory's mask shattered entirely, panic flickering across features that had once been carved in arrogance. You're hysterical, he snapped, his voice cracking, but Alana's calmness only magnified his unraveling. She reached into her bag, pulling out her phone, the recording app glowing on the screen. This entire conversation, she said, her tone like steel wrapped in velvet, has been recorded. And the people waiting outside are very interested in hearing it. At that moment, the doors opened. Patricia Monroe stepped inside, flanked by 2 federal agents. Their presence cut through the restaurant like a blade, authority radiating in every stride. Gregory's face drained of color, Amanda's lips parted in disbelief. The diners fell silent, the performance Gregory had staged dissolving into a nightmare he could not escape. The agents approached the table, their voices calm but unyielding. Gregory Vance, Amanda Prescott, you are both under investigation. The words hung heavy, undeniable, stripping Gregory of the power he had wielded for so long. Alana rose slowly, her movements deliberate, every eye in the room following her. She straightened her dress, her dignity intact, her resolve unbroken. You thought you could destroy me, Gregory, she said, her voice quiet but commanding. But you forgot one thing. I was never yours to break. Amanda's knees seemed to buckle as the agents cuffed her, her reputation collapsing in the span of a breath. Gregory's glare seared with hatred, but beneath it was the unmistakable tremor of fear. He spat words of defiance, threats that rang hollow, his empire crumbling as strangers watched him dragged away. As Alana walked toward the door, her heart pounded with something deeper than triumph. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about vindication. She thought of the women before her, the ones Gregory had ruined, and knew that in this moment, she carried their voices too. She thought of every time she had been told she didn't belong, every glance that cut her down, every word meant to remind her of her place. Tonight she had rewritten the story. She was not a victim. She was the woman who stood in the fire and refused to burn. The flashbulbs of phones captured the scene, whispers turned into gasps, and as the night air wrapped around her outside the restaurant, Alana knew this was not simply the end of a marriage. It was the end of an empire built on arrogance, deceit, and the weaponization of prejudice. And though Gregory and Amanda would face their reckoning in the courts, Alana had already won where it mattered most, in reclaiming her dignity, her power, and her truth. If this moment left you holding your breath, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss stories where justice finally wins. And tell me in the comments, do you think betrayal hurts more when it's tangled with racism? Or is betrayal always the deepest cut no matter what? I can't wait to hear your thoughts.